Okay, thanks everybody for coming here tonight. We appreciate you all and appreciate you showing up and sharing your expertise and your background here. What we're here tonight to hear about is some experiences of the Area Planning Committee. This was a previous, area planning committees were formed in 1996 in the grassroots master planning process to revise the previous Delta County master plan from 1990. The process divided the county into 7 planning areas based on distinct geographic features defined by watersheds. Each resource team with extensive public input defined its community vision, identified its natural and human resources, and recommended strategies to achieve the vision for its desired social and physical landscape. APCs guided the future growth and development in the unincorporated area of Delta County on a community level based on a shared community vision defined in the master plan. The APCs were eliminated in 2018 via a resolution. So there's some background for folks like getting up to speed on what the area planning committees are or were, and we'll hear tonight from some people who were members of the area planning committees to get a little bit of insight into how they worked and what their experiences were and how this might be relevant to us today as a path forward. So with that, we're going to get into introductions of the panelists. And Kim, if you want to start out and go ahead and introduce yourself, and then just pass the mic down to each of you.
Sure. Hi, my name is Kim Shay. I was on the Blue Creek Area Planning Commission, then graduated to the regular Planning Commission, and ended as chair of the Delta County Planning Commission. I believe I spent a total of 9 years doing it.
Hello, my name is Pennetta. I was on the Crawford Area Planning Commission from approximately 2018 until the disbandment of our area planning commissions.
My name is Jen Sanborn. I actually wasn't on an area planning commission. I was just part of the regular Delta County Planning Commission, and I represented the North Fork Valley area. But I worked with, it was probably the last year or two, the area planning commission members were working with us, so I had that experience.
Hi, I'm Tony Prendergast. I joined the Crawford Area Planning Committee in 2006, served on that for 3 years. In 2009, I was appointed to the Planning Commission and served there for 9 years through 2017, I believe, including a couple of years as the chair of the Planning Commission. And I just want to say that I thought it was important to have I really enjoyed it and thought it was important to help contribute to the planning efforts in Delta County. It's been a long evolution, and I had a chapter in that. And I feel like it's really important, and this was just another opportunity. I kind of had my time, but this was an opportunity to weigh in on the process that's going on today. And so I left the fields and ran down here to see if I had anything useful to say. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'd like to start out with a question. Can you tell us how the area planning committees worked?
Okay. I started on the Area Planning Commission representing Crawford and representing Crawford the entire time until the disbandment of the Area Planning Commissions. I felt that for me it was really valuable to see county planning commission come to the different areas and listen to the feelings about the people who lived in those areas and how they felt about the development or the change of use that was going to take place. The disbandment was said to happen to make it a smoother and quicker process. And I felt that keeping the area planning commission and having the one meeting that they wanted occur in the area that was going to be affected by whatever the new building or the new change of use again was going to be. The commissioners felt it was smoother to just do away with the area planning commissions and go ahead and just have one meeting. And
Well, could you tell us a little bit more about like actually how they operated? You know, just mechanically for people who are unfamiliar with the process and how it might be different from what's happening today.
Well, the applicant would come with their representative. The county would send a county planning commission. They would already have had one meeting prior to going into the area. And they would come to the area and present exactly what they wanted to do, whatever the case may be. And people from the area could actually talk to the applicant and talk about things of concern to them. Say a fellow wanted to put a well in for his domestic water on a development that he was planning, and the neighbors had wells, and they wanted to know if those wells would affect their water flow, and just things of that sort. The height of a building may be affecting a neighbor's views. And that would all be discussed with the applicant, the area, people from the area, and the area planning commission, and the general planning commission.
So maybe let's start with how people were selected for the area planning committees.
Well, you were selected by when there was a vacancy. The county commissioners announced there was a vacancy, and you would write a letter saying that you were interested in serving and being on your area planning commission. And the county commissioners took those letters and hand chose who they wanted to put on those area planning committees.
It was the same process as how people were appointed to the planning commission. Same process as how folks were appointed to the planning commission. Appointment by the county commissioners who expressed their interest, and they would choose who they wanted on there.
So what was different about the way the area planning committees worked?
The area planning committees were a little more informal than the planning commission process. And they had less, I don't think we had bylaws as area planning committees necessarily. So it was a more informal process, and also the planning commission through the bylaws actually has some powers as a quasi-government sort of entity, that the area planning committees were just more informal and didn't actually have the same kind of power by state statute.
And did you have specific land use codes that you were working with?
I think originally, and actually, again, Bob may go back to that time, but in the original 1996 master plan, the idea was that the area planning committees and the different geographic areas could have developed their own set of we didn't call them codes really, but of development regulations. But that actually never panned out. It never came to fruition entirely. So it was a good and interesting idea, but I think ran into just the difficulty of implementing it.
Well, we were really more of an advisory board, and we were in touch with the people in our community. People in the community would come at times and say, this is, what I think about that, or this is of concern to me. And then we would pass that on to the planning commission. We had no real authority whatsoever. We just worked within our own communities.
And so people were coming to you with disputes, essentially, right? Something typically doesn't arise unless it's a dispute. Is that?
Not necessarily so.
No?
I think sometimes somebody might say, I am in favor of this. This looks like a good idea. I think this could be good for the community. More times it was the person that wanted to stop something from happening, but it was both ways.
It was, and we tried to make it as local as possible because we, in theory, knew the local people. And we could hopefully mitigate some of the concerns that the neighbors may have. And that was kind of the idea of it. We did have, recommendations go to the county commissioners. I think, I know Steve Wolcott and I, he was in Paonia and I was in LaRue Creek. We both had difficulty getting other APC members to show up. So you're at some point sitting across the table from a couple that are trying to do something and they're paying a lawyer $500 an hour to sit there and stare at me. And all I can tell them is, well, I don't see anything wrong with it, but I don't have a quorum. I can pass what I think up to the county commissioners. But it was very frustrating because we could not get a full quorum to vote, or, I would talk to, if somebody had a concern and ask them what their concerns were, and then ask the applicant and all that kind of stuff. But really, if I was the only one there, or if there were only two of us there, we didn't have a quorum. So it was kind of frustrating when you could not get your fellow APC members to show up. And I think that was one of the main reasons that we, on the planning commission, and I was on there when that happened, and the thinking at that point was, since we had so much difficulty getting APC members to show up, and from the applicant standpoint, that it took that much longer for the process to begin, because in theory, if we had the APC all the way to the Board of County Commissioners approval, it could take somebody 3 months in order to get that. And so our thinking was, since we weren't getting a whole lot of participation in the APCs, if we needed to go back and talk to them, and I did many times, up in the North Fork, because I represented LaRue Creek. But I also, talked to people in Paonia and Crawford also. If they had concerns about something, I would say, hey, I hear you have a concern. Tell me what it is. I can't promise you I can fix it, but I'll do my best to mitigate it. But I think that the main reason that our APCs were disbanded had more to do with lack of participation and speeding up the process for the applicant, because we did not have zoning, so it couldn't just be like rubber stamped and say, okay, you can do this in this area and you can't do this in another area, kind of deal.
Just in that realm, the APC members did not have a vote. We could give our opinion, recommendation, but the planning commission had the votes. So if there was no quorum, it was not because the two area planning commissioners or commissioners from that area, the area planning commissioners, they could be there, but if there weren't other people that came mostly from the Cedar Edge and Surface Creek, I should say, and Delta area to give the planning commission a quorum, then that shouldn't really lay in the hands of the APC as a fault for that happening.
You're expressing some of the issues with it. What would you imagine would be different if you were to instate this today, if we were to reinstate the area planning committees? How would we address some of those issues?
Well, I would think you would just have one meeting and the planning commission would come to that area and just have that one meeting there to save the time. Because as Kim said, it was a ridiculous amount of time for an applicant that wanted to really get going on something. Seasonally, there's only certain times that are really good to be working on a property, working outside on something, and to begin a project that you came to the commission in spring and you got permission to do it in the winter. That just didn't work out.
Yeah, and I don't think that we definitely were aware of, citizens being concerned with things that were happening in their neighborhoods. And we did try our best to mitigate those concerns when we could. But the APC is just, it was making the process last far too long. The lack of participation with the people who had volunteered for it made it difficult and made it much more expensive for the applicants. So it was, I think, on the planning commission, I helped make that decision because I had experienced it with the Lure Creek. We were trying to help the applicants. And we also felt that and did send Kelly Yeager out on numerous occasions when there were consternacious issues, when we no longer had the planning commission. And there were a few that we went out on, like the mine thing and...
The mine thing, the horse
Right.
stables.
The horse stables and when the guy wanted to put the mining...
Used mining equipment
The used
sales.
mining equipment,
and-
repair and sales thing.
and
So we would-
ammunition sales.
And we also insisted at one point that the planning commission needed to move around. So if something was in the North Fork, we needed to meet in the North Fork. So people wouldn't have to travel so far. We were still doing our best to attempt to get people involved and so they could show up without having to drive, from Crawford 30 miles to Delta and then back, that kind of thing.
I'm just wondering if we can speak to some of the successes of the Area Planning Commission. Like, what are some of the good ideas or some of the success stories out of it?
I can speak of one in particular. It was the applicant wanted to put in a riding arena and multiple individual stables, just expanding her horse operation. And the neighbors got a little bit of information, but not a lot of information. And so there was a lot of pushback on it. And controversy that started basically from not enough information going out to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then word of mouth, and that spread. So our planner at the time was Kelly Yeager, and he just planned a meeting out there at the stables so that we could see it for ourselves with our own eyes. The neighbors could come. The applicant was there, happy to answer questions. And once the neighbors saw what was happening, they all went, this really isn't a very big deal. And it helped. And then so take that information and come back inside to the Planning Commission meeting, and so many of the questions had been answered. And actually, there weren't a whole lot of people that showed up for that because their concerns had been addressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's been a really successful development over there. So my view is getting to the place with the people who have the questions and talking about it, the applicant and the people with the concerns. That was the value to me that I saw on the Area Planning Commission.
Yeah, I would agree. It helped provide a more informal, a very localized forum for specific applications. It was always a specific application that somebody would be bringing to the table. Somebody wanting to do a project, a development project, and they would have to go through the process. And the first step in the process, the first public step, was an area planning committee meeting. And the localism of that was, I think by far and away the most effective part of it.
Yeah.
And that was uneven throughout the county. There was way less activity in that way down in the Delta area, and maybe a little bit less up in Surface Creek than there was up in the North Fork and Crawford. And one of the things that I think was lost with the disbandment of the area planning committees was the fact that, you know, the whole process kind of, for the most part, moved down into the county courthouse, you know, kind of seat of power, and is not as localized anymore. And that's the downside. But there were also a lot of upsides in a process that, you know, became more streamlined. The way I look at it is the area planning committees were an important part of the evolution of land use planning in Delta County, and served a useful purpose, but they, I think, were outgrown. And one of the things that happened to kind of take their place in some ways is the planning commission was expanded to a larger planning commission to get more regional representation on the planning commission. And then I stepped off, so I don't have a great sense for if that's been effective or not. But the area planning process was cumbersome. It was expensive, I'd say, in terms of staff time, and it was slow for applicants. And, you know, those were the issues that needed to be addressed and were back in 2018 or something.
Yeah.
With a lot of debate and a lot of thought of how that happened. I guess looking forward, a way to incorporate the concept of area planning committee system, I think, is less about every application, which has been streamlined significantly with the land use code and the zoning concept. But in the development of land use codes, so like now, you know, they're looking at or wanting to do a revision of the land use code, I think there'd be a need for a bit more of a formalized process using geographic area committees to help inform that process, which it looked like the Planning Commission wasn't entirely effectively bringing to that maybe. Yeah, so I have some questions about that right now, but I think that would be a way in which area planning committees could tend to serve moving forward, be reconfigured from different what they were in the past, but some way to use them and bring that localism back into the process.
I know that we did our best to try to involve the locals in it. It was just, you know, it was very frustrating when only one person would show up. And it was very expensive for the applicant. I know on several occasions I would hear through the grapevine that they didn't feel somebody felt they weren't being represented. So I would just call them up and say, hey, why don't you and 5 of your friends meet me upstairs at Louis for a glass of wine and let's talk about it. I can't promise you I can give you what you want, but I want to hear what you have to say, and I'll tell you what I think and what I know, and maybe we can work something out. Nobody's ever going to get everything they want, but we could, you know, just the personal touch of the local individuals, I think goes a long way towards making everybody happier on all of these things. And the other thing I would say is that Delta County is remarkably different from east to west. In Delta and Service Creek, you can walk up to the counter at Tri-County Water or Service Creek Water and write a check and get a water tap. That is not true in almost all of the North Fork area. Some water companies, domestic water companies I'm talking, don't have any other taps, won't sell taps, does a lottery with taps maybe every 3 years based upon what kind of stuff they have. So the North Fork area is very different than other parts of the county, because water is going to determine where growth goes up here. It's not that way so much in the Service Creek, Cedar Ridge, Delta area, but it matters a lot up here, especially if you're going to have something that's going to involve a large amount of water being used, or they're out in the middle of nowhere and we can't get a tap to them, can't haul water anymore. It's a health and safety thing. You know, if they can get a well that is potable, that's cool. But back in the 80s and early 90s, it was kind of a Wild West thing. And there were a lot of, especially shared wells, that went in that never should have been and been approved. Whether they went through the process or not, I'm not really sure, because I wasn't on with them. But every one of those that I know of in the North Fork area has failed to a large extent, those shared wells. The original people that own it, cool, they know about it, they were the ones that put it in. They most likely didn't have an inspection, and they most likely did it the cheapest way they could. Well, the next owner didn't know that, and the next owner got the bad news about how much it was going to cost to fix that. And so my thing on the planning commission was always potable water, safe water, continuous flow of water that was reliable. Because if you don't have water in your house and you can't haul water anymore, the places that do are grandfathered in. But the state, I believe, regulates that, the hauling of water. The eastern end of Delta County is far different from the west. So maybe it's more critical up here that we have these conversations about where things are going to go. And especially if we're going to start putting light industrial parks and things like that to generate livable wage jobs in the valley, so people can live at a reasonable rate and have insurance and be able to support their families and buy a house and all that kind of stuff. So
I think that there are people right now that really feel that they should be able to develop their properties and haul water, which is a horrible mistake, because 2 years ago, Crawford turned off the hydrant to haul water, Paonia turned off the hydrant. There were people, I saw people late, early morning, late at night, filling up in Hotchkiss, coming from who knows where to get water. But as water gets shorter and shorter and more dear, these hydrants are going to get turned off, and you're not going to be able to haul water. So I think it's a really good idea that that's not happening. In the North Fork, water taps have sold for as high as $70,000. And most water companies are asking $25,000 to $35,000 to buy a tap from the company. So growth here is going to be regulated and limited to those that can really afford it, which is a shame, but it's real. The lack of water is real.
and I foresee in probably not too distant future with water being such an issue and these small water companies, they're not going to be able to keep up with the onerous state regulations they're putting into effect. I mean, yeah, it's about health and safety, but these lines that have, these companies that have like maybe 43 members, how much can you afford to charge them? You know, if the state is telling you you're going to have to put in $500,000 or $1 million new plant, how is those 43 families or 43 properties going to afford something like that? I think at some point we're going to have a discussion about joining forces or the county taking over potentially, and I know that's going to not go over well, but I don't see how we can do it with some of these smaller water companies, because even if you buy a tap, that doesn't ensure that you're going to get water, and I can think of several water companies in the valley, and Bob knows them too because he's a realtor, that even if you have water, you have a water tap. If you have a very dry year, like he's talking, and that year Hotchkiss was talking about turning off their standpipe because everybody else was coming to get it, and we couldn't let the town of Hotchkiss run out of water. And Hotchkiss treats Barrel Mesa, I believe, and they also treat Rogers Mesa. So it would have been a huge impact if we ended up running out of water. So there was talk about, a lot of talk about turning off the standpipe here. And that really would have put people in a bad way. And I think that it is the realtor's job to inform their customers of the concept of both domestic and irrigation water, how it works, what a share is, because a share in one ditch is vastly different from a share in another ditch, as far as how much water that's going to give you, how much vegetables you can grow, how much hay you can grow, those kinds of things. And as a matter of fact, there's a resolution, I believe it was done in 1994 by the county commissioners then, that the realtors were instructed to advise their clients of that. And when I found out about that, I polled every realtor I knew, and not one knew about that. How about?
I just want to,
Some of us didn't need a regulation to tell us what to do. And in that case, I think there are realtors that probably weren't giving out that information. But I know there are a number that made that very clear to people way back.
I think the master plan that we developed and that was adopted in 2018, water was, one of the bones of it. That was one of the most important considerations in it. And it's kind of self-limiting in a way, but people are surprised by it all the time as they encounter their limitations on water. And it's a super complex situation here in this county with so many, 100 or more than 100 little water companies that serve domestic water and irrigation water. So it's a tangled, difficult issue, but it was addressed, I think, extensively in the master plan. And then the land use code that was developed, I thought, in many ways, did a very good job of developing a zoning pattern, given the widely disparate development, geographical development in this county. You can see these rhyme and reasons to it when you really understand all the issues, but it's not just immediately obvious how this county, the pattern of development in the county. And I thought the land use code that was developed did a really, almost a brilliant job of finding a simple way to zone that. And that was with a 35 acre, 20 acre, 5 acre. It's not perfect, but it was the best solution I think that could have come up, and nobody else I don't think had a better idea after a lot of work on it. And it gets back to a great extent, addressing where development can occur and where there's water, and in a way that's not heavy-handed, and it's just realistic. And so I think that what the county put together with the land use code, the bones of it, are going in the right direction. They're really the right thing. And there's a lot of refinement that can happen with it. And to me, that's the important work ahead of the county right now in the process to do that, to really focus on. But the bones of what they have to start with is good.
and that's the 2021 code that you're referring to?
Yeah, and the master plan behind that.
Okay.
Yeah, I really would agree with Tony on that. There was a lot of work at that, putting that master plan together. There were meetings all over the county that were attended by numerous people. I mean, these were packed houses. And it was the rancher to the Rastafarian, sitting at the same table, discussing these issues. And the most important thing across the board, clean water, healthy environment, and clean air. Across the board, most important. And exactly what Tony said, a lot of work went into this land use plan that we have. Sure, it needs some fine tuning, but it is not something that should be thrown out the window. I mean, it's a good document. It's a good place to start.
And we should remember that both the master plan and the land use code can be revised at any time. So if something, though we spent, most of us spent hundreds of hours on the master plan especially, trying to get it right and going through it piece by piece and sentence by sentence and everything else. We did our best to address all of those issues. And then went back and readdressed them again. But both of those are living documents, and they're meant to be reviewed regularly, which hadn't been done in previous years. And it should be addressed with the current planning commission and the commissioners that they really need to drive home the fact that they do need to review these things as something occurs. And okay, maybe we need to change this because this happened. Or, you know, it's just nobody likes this or whatever. But both were meant to be, and it states somewhere, can't remember exactly where, but both of them are living, breathing documents that are intended to be reviewed and changed if needed.
I feel that the master plan that we worked on, so we worked on the most recent one, was done under pretty good circumstances, and we had a lot of public input, like these guys have said. However, it does say that they should be reviewed and revised if necessary. The problem is if the county, the planning commission and the county staff does not include the public on those revisions, we've gone from this broad spectrum master plan to a very narrow spectrum master plan, potentially. So I agree, they're living documents, but there should be a real emphasis put on getting the public back involved again.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
that basically just squashed all of that work that we did with the community through all of those hundreds of hours of work. So I think that's a big influence, or big important issue that needs to be addressed, because I haven't seen that addressed yet. They'll talk about reviewing the master plan for potential revisions, but I have not seen any discussion on public input. So that's important.
And is it also a question of how much public input there is on the land use codes themselves, where the land use codes should in theory be guided by the master plan, but should there be a certain degree of public input on that as well?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, my philosophy is the people's voice should be where it starts, and then you move forward. You have to move forward through the county process. But yeah, I believe that there should be public input on the land use codes. What you risk is, you know, master plans are supposed to last, I can't remember, I think they're only supposed to be 5 years. They're supposed to be reviewed. So we had that last one from 1996 right up to 2018. I'm throwing those numbers out.
Nobody touched it.
Nobody touched
Yeah.
it. And it was still a good document. I remember being pretty impressed with it. What you risk is your planning commissioners come and go, your board of county commissioners come and go. There could be a trend. There could be a specific agenda or item, and suddenly it doesn't fit with the master plan. Oh, well, we need to change that master plan. And that's a dangerous road to take in my view. So, yeah, there should be a process spelled out before the master plan gets revised, in my opinion.
Yeah, and, you know, the process, well, you know, it was unfortunate that the land use code, that, you know, so the master plan happened pre-pandemic and there was a lot of public input. And then when the pandemic happened, you know, the gears of government still need to turn. The land use code needed to be, you know, was in process. So it was adopted during the pandemic, and that's not the fault of the county. You know, something had to happen, but it did not have the same level of public involvement because of that. And, you know, so be it. Let's not blame anybody.
Bring the mic closer.
But, you know, we just need to accept that as what happened. But now that there's an opportunity for a revision of that, or a need for it, you know, you draft something the first time and put it out, it's obviously going to need work. You know, these are very complex documents. And so that's fair. It needs revision, needs some fine tuning. The process to do that, you know, what is that? The planning commission, I think it's up to 12 members now, isn't it? with the alternates and stuff, but they can attend and have
Right.
input. So that's a big group that has a lot of geographical representation around the county. Now, whether, I'm not saying they're not doing their job, but it's really, there's quite a few opportunities for citizens to raise their hand and tell the county commissions they'd like to be on that group. There's quite a few people on there, and there's always going to be some turnover and opportunities for folks to get on there. So that's one of the first things is people should, step up and try to get on there. There should be waiting lists of folks who want to get on that. You go, you schmooze the county commissioners to tell them why you want to be on there, and get on there. That's the seat at the table. So people need to do that if you're interested in, in really being involved. But when the last revision process happened over this last winter, and there was there was open meetings and public process. I think I wasn't paying as much attention, and the county didn't do a great job of putting out like a red line version that was easy to read, and it turned out there were a lot more changes than what they kind of said in the website. Not good process really, but I could see a place for kind of reinstigating the area planning committees if necessary to bring that revision process into the local communities more, and to have meetings in the North Fork and in Cedar Ridge, the Surfs Creek, and down in Delta County. That's where they usually are, but at the courthouse. But and really go through that process of trying to engage people, make it easy for them to engage. And that's what I haven't seen happen as much, and I would like to see that happen more. And I really appreciate the work of involved citizens who put pressure on the county to do more of that. And that's really legitimate. But county can do more.
So it seems like I'm hearing from you actually two potential ways we could build a bridge between the citizens and the governance. And the one is on the actual formation of the codes and the master plan. Can we organize the way that we're receiving input on those? And then the other place to build a bridge is on actually, when we've already got the codes and the master plan, the process by which people interface with it. What I'm hearing is a function that the area planning committee served was more of an informal way to get information and get yourself in alignment with what the requirements were before approaching the more formal and official process.
The way that,
do I get that right?
Yeah, I think so. So the way the process used to work is that anytime somebody wanted to do a subdivision or a commercial development, specific development application, we call it, they had to have a couple of public hearings. Three of them, but one, it started with a public hearing in front of the area planning committee in the local area, in the geographic area, and then from there it went, the area planning committee would make a recommendation of modifications to it in order to pass it or deny it, but they would just be recommendations. Then it would go to the planning commission, and that body would hear the exact same information, same people would be talking to. It was pretty redundant at some point, especially for more routine type applications. A month later, there'd be a month for the area planning committee, then there'd be a month for the planning commission, and then it would go to the county commissioners for the final hearing. And so it was a 3-month process. That was too long.
Minimum, yeah.
Yeah, minimum, if nothing hung it up. What's been streamlined now in the land use code, the current one, is that it's more defined what you can do and what you can't do. And so there's a lot more things you can do. You don't have to have a hearing. It just can happen. If it fits the criteria, it can happen. But then there's still a process. If it's got gray areas and the staff or administrators think, we don't know if this really fits the criteria, or it's a gray zone, then it has a hearing in front of the planning commission That's an appropriate process. There's nothing wrong with that. Then the other part of it is how the code is revised. So it's not this individual applications to do a development, a subdivision or something. It's more when there are revisions or development of the code or changes to the master plan, how is that process going to unfold? That, maybe in question a bit now.
Right. So those seem like two separate issues that were
Exactly.
discussed.
One is what do we used to call it? It was like a legislative function. You're actually making the policies that guide that are the regulations, and the other one is
Quasi-judicial.
quasi-judicial, where you're actually hearing the applications. Yeah, and it's important for we used to be trained as on planning commission. You wear two different hats. There's two different steps in your process. I would say, going forward, that the area planning committees, if they're recent, do not really have a role in the quasi-judicial. That was problematic. But I think they could have a role in the legislative steps to help engage the geographic areas in a good process.
Okay, that's clarifying. And how do you both feel about that?
I think it would be good as long as it's fair to the applicant and we're not, again, wasting time between when their project is first presented.
What Tony's suggesting there is more on the process of that actually developing and updating the code, that the area planning commission committee might serve a liaison role for gathering information about what's actually relevant within the different districts to really inform how that code gets created.
Right, and I get that, and I agree with Tony. But I would say that, one of the things that we did when we discontinued the APCs, that was when we instituted that extra party in each of the districts. So they were required to show up. It was an associate. So if somebody was missing, they would step in. If somebody couldn't make it or resigned or whatever, that person would step in. But they were required to show up at the meetings and read the documents. They didn't have a vote unless one of the regular PC members were absent. But our thinking was that way we still had yet another representative from that area that potentially knew that area, that we could just slide in there if we needed to. And that way we were rolling, consistently and still being mindful of time, both of the applicant and the county, but basically the applicant and the citizens, and making sure that they were heard.
So this is a APC member showing up for the planning commission meeting where
Yeah,
the person's
they were called the
being-
alternates, yes. We had an alternate for each district. And that was derived when we did away with the APCs, because we felt that we still needed some representation or a faster way to get somebody on board from that area to help the planning commission if somebody went down due to illness or quit or termed out or, couldn't make it that night or whatever. We'd have somebody that could slide right in there and we'd still be a full crew and able to deal with whatever was presented before us that night. So.
Yes, I think that I agree with Tony. If we could change it at the policy level, there has to be a way that you can coordinate more an APC group input into this system and not have it take 3 months. I think there has to be some more brain power behind that. It also is very important. It's critical, as far as I'm concerned, with the land use codes. One of the things that I just thought of as I was listening is the last few PC meetings that I've witnessed, it seems that they're staying now, the meetings are staying in Delta, and they're not traveling the county for their meetings. And personally, I remember back while I was on the planning commission, I learned a lot about each community. I had virtually no reason to go to several of these communities and to learn about the community members and to see the landforms. That helped widen my knowledge of their area tremendously, and here I am, one of the people making decisions on the development in their area. So I tried to make a point of going to each site when I could, each site that was each application, go to the site and actually see the layout myself, see where that warehouse is, see where, and then when I was at the meeting, I had a visual, and I think I was a much more effective planning commissioner. I don't know that that's happening, and if everyone is just meeting in Delta, how are those Western County people coming out to the North Fork to actually get a visual on things? It didn't always coincide. The locations didn't coincide with the application, because I think we had a rotating application. It did not mean that the applications in Hotchkiss therefore were meeting in Hotchkiss. It was,
Well, we tried to make it that way.
Did we try?
Yeah.
But it didn't always.
It
Sometimes you'd
didn't,
have
yeah,
applications from opposite ends of the county, but
Exactly.
we were rotating the meetings into different
yeah, as best we could,
zones for a
yeah.
while, which was great, yeah.
and I can humbly say I would not have had a reason to go to some of these communities had we not done it that way. So for them to just say we're just going to meet here because it's too much trouble is one of the quotes that I heard. I think that's unfortunate. And I hope that they would take another look at that.
Is that a consequence of the growth of the county? And I would estimate as the county grows, so do the volume of requests and also potentially the complexity of the requests.
I don't know what it's a consequence of because I haven't been there in a long time. It changed after I left. Do you, Kim, do you remember? Were they still rotating when you were there?
Oh, yeah, I insisted upon it,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
especially if it was, something really important to North Fork or whatever, yeah.
And this is a good time to throw in another side note that's important to me. And that is, all of these people are volunteers and they have a lot to do in their personal lives and business lives. So it's really important to know that there were days where I had to be in Cedar Edge or Surface Creek for a meeting, and I had stuff going down at my farm. It was a real headache, and it was a headache to have to say, I gotta go, and I have to drive a little bit further. So it's not an easy ask. This isn't a simple thing like, well, you just need to drive there. It's a big ask, but I think the benefits outweigh the inconveniences.
Absolutely, and it shows the citizens that the county, even though it's just the PC, is putting forth a message that we care about the local citizens' viewpoints. And that was why I pushed for, when I was the chair of the PC, we needed to be wherever the application was coming from. And I did the same thing as Jen did, cruise by, made sure I had the lay of the land if I didn't know it. Just to get a vision in my head so I would know what we were talking about, and especially if somebody was objecting to it. And I could say, okay, so why are you objecting to it, and what do you think would happen if we allowed this project to go forward? Something like that, just have a good visual on what it was. And I would hope that every planning commissioner did that, but it was never required. Yeah.
I think I've said most of what I know.
Do you have any insights to leave us with, lessons learned from the area planning committees that we can bring forward to today's process?
I will say that one of the things that stands out in my memory is civil discourse. And I'm just talking civil discourse within the Planning Commission. There were times, not all the time, most of the time, it was a really good, efficient working group. But the chairperson who's put in charge really does have to monitor civil discourse, and they have to police it. And so inappropriate comments to one another, inappropriate comments from a planning commissioner to a public person, and I witnessed it recently, and I witnessed it when I was on planning commission. Those have to be managed. I wasn't there when Kim was a chairperson. I wasn't there when Tony was a chairperson, but some training for the chairperson and some requirements, even within their bylaws, that the chairperson has to really keep the level of civil discourse at a professional level. That's one of the things that I'd really like to see happen, because there's going to be outspoken people and there's going to be the quiet people. And the quiet people have very important things to say, but if they get shut down every time they open their mouth, for whatever reason, then you are losing the power of the group. So that's important to me.
I have one more comment, and then maybe I'll shut up. I do think that it is very important that the county spend the funds to train the new planning people. I went to a course in Montrose on my own behalf and paid for it by myself because the county didn't offer anything. They handed you a book and said, "Tit, you are one," and that was it. I still have that book and I still refer to it, but I don't believe that. Did either of you guys get any formal training? No?
Got the book.
Got the book? Yeah, they handed you the book and that was about it?
There was a couple different, I recall a couple different training seminars in Delta County, and another one I went to somewhere else. I
There was
can't
one in
remember
Montrose I went to,
context
yeah.
of them, but it was minimal. And
Yeah.
the thing to realize, planning at the county level is one of the things that contributes or degrades our quality of life more than almost any other activity of the county government. And citizen participation is really important in that process. And training is a part of that. And the county, God bless them, Delta County has remained solvent for a long time, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
But spending wisely to fund county planning and, training for planning commissioners is a part of that for sure. Going out into the communities to hold hearings and gather public input is expensive, but it's important. Hiring really good quality consultants to actually, do the physical writing of plans, like the land use code revision, is really important. And, we always have to live within budgets, but, the county commissioners have, for all of us, it's a relatively large budget. It's quite a bit of discretion about where funds are spent. And I just think that it's not something to cheap out on. And why this last blow up happened around the revision of the land use code means that somebody was asleep at the wheel. Why didn't the planning commission or the county commissioners have enough of a pulse on the community to know that was going to, become as much of a conflagration as it was? Means that people were not paying attention. They weren't in touch with the community. And, learn from that mistake and then do more outreach, do, what is needed to get the quality of county planning that we all deserve.
I think Tony said it all right there. Yep.
All right, so with that, we wrap up tonight, and thank you all for sharing your comments and your experiences. We will have some links in the description, and we're all, hoping for a process here that will include the public and will create both a master plan as well as the land use codes that are going to be right for people here. So, thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.